Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. Excited to have our guest today. She just got back from a really cool trip. I want to hear about it. Her name is Brenda Quinn. Brenda, thanks for being here today. I can't wait to talk about your journey. Usually, I always start out with the question, how'd you go from being a traditional therapist to a traveling therapist? So I'd love if you would tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I've ever been traditional a day in my life, but I've always traveled, even through grad school. It was important to me, in between semesters and things. Then I worked for the county doing crisis response for a while, and I discovered the hack that I used to start traveling again with kids and things like that by working a lot of overtime and accruing ridiculous amounts of comp time so it wouldn't touch my vacations. What I would do is kind of extend my shifts at work and forward hours. It was like Scrooge McDuck, if you know that reference, with my PTO. And so I would end up taking like 3 weeks off to go to Southeast Asia solo. And I'd still have my county time, my PTO and things like that. And it was a game. That's kind of where it started in terms of my clinical work and travel. And then as I started into private practice, I was like, oh my gosh, the freedom. I can do whatever I want. So I started to make sure the places that I'd go would have Wi-Fi available. I would get it on my phone too as a backup. And then I would let clients know, like, hey, I travel and I'm going to be gone this chunk of time. I'm seeing clients. If you want to do virtual versus in person, we can bridge that. It's allowed me to do a lot of cool things. I've done sessions from Africa in the middle of the night, lots of stuff. Yeah.
I would love to just hear about the differences like Africa and Southeast Asia and like how you made it work and the time zones and all that stuff. But even before you became a therapist, you were a travel person, like you loved it and you had a job that allowed you to do that too. Would you share about that at all?
Yeah. I think the itch happened in undergrad, college. I studied in Mexico for a short time, just a summer. And that was like, oh my gosh, I guess I can be self-sufficient and, learn a language and things like this. So that was sort of the initial scratch of the itch. And then I guess after college, I, on a whim, went to a flight attendant open house and got a job as a flight attendant. And the airline that I worked for was all international. And so we'd be gone 20 days a month at a time. We'd work our way out of the country and then we'd stay kind of hub to hub over Europe and the Middle East. So that was sort of like, oh, this can be extended.
Oh, that is awesome. So could you do that? I always wonder about flight attendants. Like, okay, can you do the 20 days and then just stay somewhere if you want to and then hop back on? Or do you have to like get back to your home hub? I always wonder how that works.
Way back then, it had to be you leave from your hub, but you could stay as long as you got yourself back in time for your next
That's cool.
Yeah, I just loved that. I was like, oh my gosh, well, now I know how to live out of a suitcase for 20 days at a time and make that sustainable. I learned all the hacks for not spending money on food and, you load up on that free breakfast. I learned a lot of skills of how to like travel cheap. And yeah, I just rolled that. I teach my kids. I have 2 girls. And when they turned 10, respectively, I took them on a trip and was like, we're not vacationing, we're traveling. It's different. And, they had to schlep their stuff and we kind of backpacked it off the beaten path and it was great.
So what are some tips? I'd love to hear some just for people listening.
One that I get a lot of side glances about is I take my nastiest clothes that barely fit anymore or, they're beyond donation. And so I'll take those and then leave them behind because they're headed for the garbage anyway. So I don't travel looking amazing, but my suitcase lightens and I fill it with stuff, the treasures I buy along the way. And so that's probably my biggest one is take the clothes you wouldn't donate.
That is fantastic. And then eat the free buffet breakfast and hopefully it'll last you all day until dinner or something like that.
Yeah, never miss breakfast. And then, street food. Almost never sit down and eat somewhere. It's just like finding pad thai for however many bahts is worth way more to me. So I could eat on the go. I'm American, right?
That's so funny. Okay, so Southeast Asia for 3 weeks solo trip. Were you a therapist at that point or was that before you became a therapist? Were you like working while you did that trip?
Yeah, no, I was not working. That was back in the time of the county hours when I had worked. You earn like time and a half of overtime and I ended up just really loading up my satchel with some hours that I could, use at my discretion. But I don't use travel agencies. I design all of it myself, all my logistics. One of my proudest things that time is I took a bus from Brunei to Malaysia. I have a knack for making it happen and cheaply. I don't like to spend money frivolously. And some people view travel as frivolous. I consider it air. It's my spiritual medicine.
So we've had guests on here before that just do solo travel that actually are just nomadically living and they're also solo. And it just always amazes me because I'm like, I don't think I could do it. What was it like just by yourself? Was it scary? I just would love to hear like your experience with it.
I find it so freeing. I'm not opposed to traveling with people. Like I just got back from Peru with my niece who just turned 10. But as a flight attendant, I was traveling in hordes of people and we could break off and do our own thing. But it was like someone else is hungry. So now I got to stop what I'm doing. We got to leave the beach because someone else wants to find a bathroom. And so that first solo trip that I did that was extensive was just the most freeing I've ever felt. And of course, it's layered with, I have kids and they were little at the time, staying home with their dad. So yeah, I just find it very freeing. There's no compromise. I feel like in life here at home, it's a lot of like, okay, the kids have whatever going on. We've got choir rehearsal or we have activities and doctor's appointments and school meetings and things like this that I just don't feel that autonomy so deeply. So when I get out, it's like, oh, it's me time. And I really enjoy connecting with other travelers too. So even in Peru, I was on a boat talking to an Asian couple that were living in Chicago, but also traveling extensively, and a man from Brazil. And we're just all swapping, like, where have you been in Lima? What was the best thing? Swapping tips. And it's just, I find that everywhere I go. When you're with your buddy, you tend to just like, it's me and them, and we don't branch out and you're not talking to people. But I've made some really great international connections with people that I've met. There was a guy from Senegal that I met on the street in Singapore, and we just got to talking and had coffee. And, I have a friend that lives in Casablanca that I met in Bali. And so we're still connected with Instagram and things. Like, it's just a lot of fun.
And it's cool to hear you say like, okay, I've got kids and a husband, but I'm still going to take time and go travel by myself because I need it. I want it. And that your family is just super supportive of that too. Because I talk to people all the time. They're like, there's no way my family's going to let me go and just do whatever I want to do. I mean, I hear that a lot, especially people that want to be traveling therapists. They're like, my husband won't travel. He doesn't want to, or he's got a job that keeps him here, that kind of thing. And it never occurs to them, I could just go by myself. I do that all the time. Like I'll leave my boyfriend, we live in Airbnbs, but we'll be in some random city and I'll be like, yeah, I'm actually going to Greece with my mom. Like I did that in October and he's like, okay, well, I'm just going to chill here and it's totally fine. But a lot of people don't even consider that as an option because they're really stuck in that traditional, I have to travel with my husband and my kids when I go on a vacation. Or I like how you said there's a difference in vacation and traveling too, but yeah.
Oh yeah. I don't do a lot of laying by pools or all inclusives or anything like, I mean, I'm out. I'm catching buses and sleeping on trains and, on to the next thing.
So your clients are totally aware that you travel. You still have that kind of open conversation with them when you start working with them?
Yeah, I'll tell them, I'll go for chunks of time. And I really don't view therapy, and there's nothing wrong with those who do, but I don't view it as like every week, all the time for everyone, because I don't think that's best practice for every case. And so, I've recently taken on a lot of couples because I have a unique approach with couples where we might be really intensive on the front end. And then I'm like, okay, go do your things in the wild and come back and we'll check in. But they're doing their thing in the wild for 3 weeks while I'm gone, So that works out. When I go to Brazil this coming May, I'm working on that itinerary, but I'm blocking a full day every week to just do a lineup of sessions. And then the rest will be me time, move around.
That's perfect. Do you sort of assess who has the higher acuity or who's like, yeah, they definitely are going to need at least one session while I'm gone for a month or whatever? Do you just kind of do an assessment and then decide, all right, we'll put you guys on the schedule?
I leave a lot to them. I wouldn't say that the folks that I have on my caseload are high acuity. I've done years of hospital work and very intensive acuity. I don't tend to draw that group. I get a lot of artsy, non-traditional folks that, they're not in any kind of high risk. They're just processing and kind of managing stress. And, like I said, with couples, I don't envision that to be super long-term work. One of my first pieces is like, both of you need individual therapy. Let's find that. Not everybody, but often, I'll try and connect them. And then we just work on the relationship pieces. For the individuals, though, they may opt to keep checking in online or not. It depends. I have some that are like staunchly in-person people, which is fine.
So you do have an in-person office and a telehealth office?
Yeah.
Cool.
And my office is actually, I run it out of my house.
Really? I'd love to hear about that because that has always fascinated me.
Yes, I'm kind of living the dream there. My commute is amazing. I am in network with all major insurance too. I've disclosed every time. It's a home office. I have a private entry. So nobody's walking through my living room and like fist bumping my kids on their way to sessions. They just come in their own door. And so, yeah, I see them here. I don't see anybody that's in any kind of active psychosis or substance, where it's really risky for them to know where I live. I work from a place of authenticity, like, hey, this is my space. And I tell them up front, it's a home office. So if you want something commercial, I'm not your girl. But I've had the feedback from so many people that are like, this is way more cozy. I love this. I actually was drawn to this because it's in a house and not a center. So it works for me. I love it. I've never had any like boundary infringements issues there. So yeah, like I said, I don't do anything traditional.
Yeah, right. It doesn't sound like it because, therapists ask me all the time, like, oh my gosh, if I'm telehealth only and I'm with insurances, I'm going to have to put my home address and then it's going to be on the directory and people are going to know. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Are clients going to come find you? I don't know. I think one time in my entire telehealth career, a person actually showed up to my like PO box office and they were like, this doesn't look like an office. And I'm like, no, this is a telehealth appointment. But it only happened one time. So I don't know. I always wondered about that. If people were like, it's totally fine, I don't care. Or if they had bad experiences with it. That's really interesting to hear. You don't hear it very often.
Yeah, I get a lot of, especially from coworkers at the hospital when I was working there. I worked there for several years doing emergency department assessment. And so those are people you don't want coming to your house. But, all my coworkers are you crazy? That's dangerous. What are you doing? And I'm like, it's a different crowd. I work with a lot of like happy hippies, processing stress.
That's funny. And I guess your husband and kids, they're like, whatever, like they don't even think twice about it.
Well, the husband fell off.
Oh, we did.
The husband, I don't have. Yeah, we chose peace. That was amicable. We get along okay. My kids, they know to be quiet when they're upstairs because, it's in my basement space, which is finished. So they know like no loud TV. And usually, when the kids are with their dad, I will load my schedule. That's when I do my most work too. So session times are pretty loaded when they're in school or when they're, on the days they're with their dad. Though it still happens. I'll be in session and you'll hear a backpack drop. You'll hear the dog tapping, But I think there's a humanness to that too.
Oh, right? Yeah. I worked at an office with really thin wall. It was like we had the sound machines going, but you definitely would hear like occasionally a couple might start up next door yelling or something, or there might be doors slamming. It's just part of it. Yeah, I totally get that. So you're going to be going to Brazil and you've got this worked out where one day a week you're going to see clients still. What's the time zone like in Brazil as to where you are? I'm just curious about how you're going to manage all that.
Yeah, I actually haven't looked. My sense is it's probably a couple hours. In Peru, it was just Eastern time. Brazil's a little bit more east, so it'll be probably a couple hours. I'm not too worried about that. I have done sessions from Africa before, which was like an overnight deal. There were some hiccups just in, internet connection. The country I was in actually didn't have 5G at all, so I had to cancel a couple, which was disappointing because I couldn't get internet, but I was able to do, I think, 4 in a row, and then maybe 4 fell off. I'd done the same in the Dominican Republic. I'd done like a little solo deal, and I'd had it more spaced out. The only issue there is I was at this like resort because it was way off the beaten path. No one spoke English. There wasn't even a store, but that's what I wanted, was just like solitude, recalibrate. I had some CEU credits going that I was listening to while I was looking at the ocean. And so, it was like the quietest resort ever. I think I might have been the only person for a couple of nights. And then all of a sudden I had telehealth sessions. And that's when like the town came and used the pool and they were blaring. And I was like, oh no, I can't quiet this. My clients didn't seem to care. They thought it was funny. But I was like, okay, so that's another thing to remember for next time.
When is the pool day? When does the live band come outside of my door? Yeah.
It really was outside the window, and the window was just slats. It was open air. Yeah. So that was a trip.
That's funny. A little tip for anybody listening. There's this app called the Crisp app. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's HIPAA compliant. It's like you download it and put it on your computer and it blocked all background noise. I was living in a condo in Hollywood, Florida, and they were doing construction in the building. They were like jackhammering like 2 floors above us, and people could not hear it with this Crisp app on. Just a little side note. I could hear it because I would be like, I could barely hear what you're saying or with this noise, but they couldn't hear it. So it's KRISP, just side note. So Brazil and in Africa, you went there, that worked, but it had some problems. Okay.
Well, the Dominican Republic. I've got Brazil coming up.
Brazil's
coming, I anticipate that'll be smooth. I've always been a mover and a shaker. I'm always like bouncing. I've been here 4 days, time to fly, time to catch the train, time to, but I think in Brazil, I'm going to try and chill out. It's a 3-week deal. So I'm going to try and slow down.
That's so cool. So 3 weeks and like 3 days of clients essentially once a week kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I might, if more are interested, I might open it up and do 6 days of clients. But I try to load my schedule that I have very full days, a couple days a week. So it's not every day. I'm really working on balance and pacing myself and taking as many clients as feels right. I don't work for an agency. I don't have to hit a quota. So the freedom in that is a lot of privilege too.
That's amazing. So this will be a solo trip to you, the one to Brazil?
Yep, I'm looking forward to that. I don't have Australia, New Zealand figured out yet. I've bought the ticket, but I haven't started the skeleton of the trip, I'll probably go back to Bali because it's a wonderful place.
Oh my gosh, I would love to go to Bali. So what's your plan for planning this stuff? You say that you're really good at that, like scheduling the itineraries and figuring all that stuff out. Do you have like certain apps you go to or like a process? Because I know that's a stumbling block for a lot of people too, is the logistics, like how do I figure it all out? It seems overwhelming.
Yeah. A whole lot of Google. I actually started looking at ChatGPT a little bit, but I don't know that it won't take over my process. It's pretty old school. I'll print a blank calendar and then I write in it like my flight confirmations and the times and the cities to block the trip. And then I'll just look at it. Like I fly into Sao Paulo. What's in Sao Paulo? I'll do a Google. I'll read tours that are available. A lot of it's just stealing from tours that exist already. Here's the sites, here's the things. What's interesting to me, I can find it cheaper. You go direct to the agencies versus TripAdvisor. I love them, but also like, okay, who's running this tour? Then I find those people and then I look at the pricing options from there. And also transportation. I'll look at like, how do people get from Sao Paulo to Rio? Well, you can fly, you can bus. Here's what the buses are like. And then I might in advance buy the ticket. I might just show up. I'm pretty good. I mean, I've done crisis work for years and years. So like, I'm pretty good at just rolling with the hiccups. And that's the other piece about being solo is I don't have to manage anyone else's anxiety about the missed flight or, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Like, we're going to find some lunch and we're going to figure it out. I really enjoy that part because not everyone has that outlook or that lens. They need to have very concrete, here's the plan. And if the plan breaks, which it always will, how do you roll with that? And I'm pretty good at that too.
Yeah, that resiliency and just being able to say, okay, well, we got this. That's really cool.
There was a trip I did 2 Southeast Asias. One of them I did a 6-country loop, a variety of one-way tickets. And I was supposed to take a boat from Cambodia to Vietnam. It might have been Malaysia. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I was supposed to take a boat and kind of cruise up. And anyway, I get to the airport and I don't have a visa. I don't know why it slipped my mind completely that I'd need a visa to get into Vietnam. And so they said, no, you can't get on the plane. I'm like, but I paid for the ticket. And they're like, sorry, no visa. And so I'm scrambling online to do it online, but then it's like 4 times the price. So I was like, okay, Vietnam's not happening. I'll figure it out and reconnect with I'll get to Cambodia, which is where I was headed, I think. I don't know. Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia. That was the plan. So I'll just get there and connect Cambodia and on. That was one of my bucket list items, actually, is to just show up at an airport and then choose a flight location. So I did. I was like, okay, Vietnam's out. Let's go to AirAsia, their desk, and figure out what I can do. And it was like Bali or Singapore, which one? And I chose Bali. They're like, okay, your flight leaves in an hour. I run to the gate, and just by some miracle, there's a computer out for public use in the airport. And so I'm online, like clicking away, and like just before boarding, like jot down my confirmation for my accommodations. And I was like, okay, and we're off. We have a place. And then after I got to Cambodia, beautiful, love Phnom Penh. Actually, I would go back. And then the same thing happened. It was like I was going to go to Myanmar, but I needed another visa. I don't know how this slipped my mind, but I'm like, shoot, I don't have a visa. Okay, get me to Bangkok. I took a train overnight, so that covered my lodging for the night. And then I showed up and was like, jungle trek tour. Yeah, I'm in. So I was like trekking a jungle instead of Myanmar, totally off the grid. It was great. It was one of my favorite adventures. I mean, it was like so much went wrong, but then also so right.
Yeah. Oh, that is
So
amazing. In situations like that, would you ever like buy trip insurance and try to like get those flights back because you missed them or anything like that? Or is it just like, well, I missed them because I didn't have a visa. I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to worry about it. Who cares? I'll just go on this and do this instead. Was it that kind of thing?
the Asia one, I just let go.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I mean, those flights, Southeast Asia is so close to everything
Yeah.
else that they're not that expensive. So it was a bummer. But,
Yeah.
I did have a significantly challenging trip for Africa. It was Africa,
Oh,
Turkey. And I had, I think, 9 flights total, and I missed 6 of them. There were
what?
connections missed, delays. Every flight was being
Oh,
canceled. It was like traveling purgatory,
oh my
if not hell.
gosh.
But I rolled with it. It was like, okay, I went to Izmir, rented a car, and just road tripped all the way to Cappadocia, which was actually way longer than I expected. I was
Oh
driving
my
so much.
gosh.
And then when I was leaving the Cappadocia area, the flight was just canceled. And I'm like, of course it was. This whole trip is being difficult.
My
But then I ended up
gosh.
just meeting some people, a couple from Spain, and I hopped in a car they rented and we drove up to Istanbul. It was like a 10-hour drive. They kept saying, they're like, it's 7-hour drive. And then we rent the car and get in, and they're like, oh, it's 10. They were
Yeah.
great.
That's so cool. So adventurous and so brave.
Yeah. It's gotten me a lot of places. It's been really fun. I definitely value that autonomy, I guess, is a big part of it. And just you have all the comforts in the world in your home. I would say perceivably, right? You know what that looks like. And to step out of that, it strengthens a muscle, of self sufficiency. And I mean, like in Minneapolis here, it's so cold. Nobody goes out at night. When we're home, we're home. It's done. We're done. I think it was last I checked, it's like -2. I think this culture here is like, while we're very artsy and we're very, pretty liberal and open and all of these things, there's still a very staunchy, like, okay, it's after 5 and I just got home. I'm not leaving again. You don't see people in Minneapolis at night unless it's summer. Then we're all out and we're all happy.
I bet. It's like we're going to soak every minute of this up while it's still warm. Oh my gosh. I totally get that. Wow. What a cool story. Thank you so much. So if anybody wanted to reach out to you, I know that you have a practice and you're probably just licensed in your state. Do you want to talk about your practice or put that out there in case anybody's listening and they want to reach out to you?
Sure. My practice is called Quintessential Therapies. And I work a lot within the queer communities and with polyamory, but I have some monogamous folks too, of course. But basically, anybody that's wanting to live in a non-traditional way, I try to coach them through like, how can you make that happen? What are the things that you limit yourself with? Or even societally, there's limitations. And how can you be the best you? Because that's what I think our job is in life. And so a lot of my work is with kind of a gamut. But I guess the common denominators are all pretty like artsy and open. So yeah, it's fun. I really enjoy it though. It's a contrast to the hospital work that I've done where people are not happy to be there. They maybe just made a suicide attempt that was pretty significant. And now I'm talking to them. The work that I do in my practice is like people who want to get better and are working on how do I find the path to doing that, and just sort of dialoguing about that and finding what fits for them, because there's just no one size fits all. It's just not a thing.
Totally. And what a better role model, somebody they can just give to Southeast Asia and make it work. That's pretty cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to us and share your adventures. And it's really inspirational too, I think. Anytime we get a solo traveler that's just like goes with the flow, I think it's so important for people to hear that message, really.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill,
Yeah, it really is.
Something you can practice at.
It really is. I mean, and it's something you've touched on is like, it will happen if you're traveling. I mean, it's not going to go smoothly. It's just part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. When I took my daughter, we had this running joke. My oldest daughter, we went to Colombia, her and and I would say, lesson number 1, lesson number 2. And throughout the whole trip, I don't know, we joked because we lost count, I'd be like, lesson number 35. But the very first one in the airport was shit never goes right. Plan for that. And, she just kind of laughed and she rolled with it. I was really proud of that. But yeah, it's how do you manage your outlook when it doesn't go right and still roll with it? Because I'd say 80% is like, if you fall apart and crumble because you're stressed, you're not going to get the results you want. You're not going to have the good time. But you could also have a good time trekking the jungle in northern Thailand instead of Myanmar. Like, also good. So,
yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.